what you want?
Slurp.
Mike, 1, 2.
Test.
Did you hit over? You hit over 5,000 total last week, didn't you? Between who listened live and who listened recorded?
We had 2,500 active live listeners, and we reached over $5,000 total.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Man, there's some mainstay shows that don't hit those numbers.
Most AM radio and a lot of FM don't reach that in a day.
Yeah.
Shows individually.
Right.
Where'd you see the numbers? Where do you see the numbers?
I'll show it to you.
Okay.
No. Outside of this.
Environment.
I'm not good at that stuff.
You look like a newsman getting ready to go on the air.
Raise up my chair.
Good
Make me
evening.
Kennedy is dead. Well, that was a good song. We got any more hits?
It's already live? Are we live? No. Okay.
Usually there's an introduction.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, they usually do an introduction.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I figured you.
I'm glad you're here, Tom, to keep me straight.
Thank
Welcome.
goodness. Thank goodness. Okay. Let's see if I can get us on Facebook.
Get it on mute.
There it goes.
Hello and welcome to Welcome Home Radio with your hosts, Blair Thomas and Tom Holm. The waters in the mortgage industry can be pretty muddy. Luckily, Welcome Home Radio has the answers for you, the consumer. And now, here are your hosts, Blair Thomas and Tom Holm.
And welcome to Welcome Home Radio, March 11th. I hope everybody's having a wonderful day out there. It's unbelievable weather. Should be out playing golf instead of in the studio, but I'm going to suffer through. Hey, we're not doing Today in History. I've got a new mortgage market pickup for you. Hopefully this will help you understand. In baseball, there is a kind of pitch called the changeup, designed to look like a fastball while actually going slower. The deceived batter swings too soon and misses. Strike, you're out. The world has thrown a wicked biological changeup at the global economy. This is a kind of how Corona-19 fear is spreading from China to the rest of the world and now the U.S. We think it's coming fast, and many Americans have swung at the pitch by selling stock, stocking up on food, canceling travel plans, and so on. Those may prove to be wise choices, but in fact the ball is still coming. As of now, medical data is still evolving. What's clear is we face an uneasily transmitted flu-like virus. However, if it's more dangerous than the normal seasonal flu, we don't know. But it does prey on the elderly and the people with other health conditions. And as it spreads, the U.S. appears to be a few weeks behind other countries where the situation is already much worse. And I believe that's a thank you to President Trump. Every death is sad, and we should all take precautions, but we all should adapt. And in due course, have a vaccine that will reduce the risk, and the economic damage will both be harder to control and harder to repair. The Federal Reserve cut rates this week, and bond traders clearly see more cuts coming. So what does that mean to you, the homeowner? Right now, mortgage rates are near the lowest levels we have ever seen. There's a good chance that we may be able to do a refinance your current mortgage into a lower rate and save you some meaningful amounts of money each month. But did you know that you could also use your mortgage as a vehicle to reduce your debt and create some wealth? The average American approximately owes $38,000 in personal debt, excluding home mortgages. And because the housing market has been so strong, home values have been rising. Home prices in Collin County are forecasted to appreciate 2.2% over this next year and 21% over the next 5. What do we have here, Sydney? We got some other sounds going on. 21% over the next 5 years. You know what that means, dollars and cents. If you purchase a home at the median price of $400,000, that means a gain of $86,000. This is a very strong housing market to invest in. So you may have the equity in your home so that you can utilize to consolidate debt, reduce your overall monthly burden. And if you're one of the 81,000 residents in Collin County who are currently renting and feel you do not qualify to buy a home or you're not sure, and the biggest misconception out there is that you need 20% down. Nothing could be further from the truth. There are programs as little as 5% or even 3% down to help you into your desired home. Please contact me, Blair Thomas, your DD214 alumni lender, at 214-794-8627, or Alan Pace at SWR Group Keller Williams at 214-906-4812 to review your situation and see if we can help you today. This housing market is tremendously strong. There's a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot of opportunity. I hope this helps you understand what we see in today's market. And again, with rates, it's unbelievable. And today, we're going to be talking about a very important situation that's taking place here, and I really want to get an idea of how much more it's impacting, which we're going to be talking evictions and foreclosures. Could be opportunity, it could be situation, challenges. But joining us, Jeff, introduce everybody here.
Well, great to see you, Blair.
Great
And
to see
thanks
you.
for
Glad
having
to
us
have you
out
here.
again. So I'm Jeff Duffy. I'm with Fidelity National Title and the Patel Law Group. We're based in Irving, and so we're a combination of a full title company, residential and commercial closings, as well as a full-service legal entity in the firm. So, and with us today, I have Mr. Brandon and Jonathan.
Hey, how's it going? My name's Brandon Smith. I am the head of our litigation department at Patel Law Group. Our litigation team is assembled of myself, Jonathan Gitlin, who's here today, and we've got one more associate attorney, Sachi DeBay. We handle virtually any kind of lawsuit you can imagine. As Jeff indicated, we have a fee office, and from that flows a lot of real estate-based litigation. I focus on construction lit. We deal with evictions, partnership disputes. You name it, we probably handle it. But again, as the topic indicated, we're here to talk about evictions and foreclosures.
I'm glad we're getting on topic there. Hey, guys, seriously, help our audience know. I mean, if we just look at Collin County, 81,000 renters, but how many situations are we dealing with foreclosure and evictions in those areas roughly? Just to give us a percentage in this today's market, is this really happening a lot more, or what is, because I have no idea of what that percentage could be.
Well, so I think that you're going to see, like a lot of things, the foreclosures and evictions are going to ebb and flow as the market ebbs and flows. And so obviously as the market goes down, you're going to see more and more. And as the market goes up, you'll probably see less. I think you and I...
Market, explain that. I'm sorry, I'm following going down. I'm thinking rates going down. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no. I'm saying like the economy in general.
As the economy goes down.
Economy.
Okay, gotcha.
As the economy goes down, one of the biggest costs for businesses is employees, right?
So let me base something on this, and Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but we just had the strongest job openings report that we've had in the last 15, 16 months, 273,000 jobs, and they expected only 170. I mean, it literally, it's one third or one half stronger almost. Are we in a good economy right now for this? I mean, we shouldn't be seen, or how would you equate that?
Well, so here's the way I look at it is there's a very technical definition to the term recession, right? So is it 2 straight quarters of economic shrinking, right? And so you never know until after the fact. You gotta. I mean, if I could predict the future, I'd be selling that for tons of money. But here's anecdotally what I can tell you. My feel on the matter.
You'd be retired already.
Oh yeah. So here's my feel on the matter. I have started getting more calls recently for within the last month or two for evictions, for doing evictions, and for bankruptcies for people trying to evict their tenants. So that typically happens when there is a worse economic
Do you mean tenants in a sense of landlords and tenants, or do you mean homeowners and banks?
Yes, both.
Both?
And so and so we can talk about both circumstances, but one of the things you're going to face as a bank is after you foreclose, if you're not able to work out some sort of like cash for keys deal or something like a deed in lieu or something like that, from time to time the bank's going to foreclose, and then the previous lender the previous borrower is still going to be in there.
So
and
I
the
think
bank's gonna have
where
to evict
Blair
them.
might have been going earlier, and I certainly have the question, in a good economy like this, understand 2009, like you said, when things are not good, businesses lay people off, people can't pay their mortgages, they get behind, they can't short sale, so they get, in trouble. Now, in a good economy, why are you seeing, what causes that in a good economy? Is it just bad money management, or what is it?
It's typically, so if I see a sharp increase, it's typically indicative that there's a downturn coming, or it has started and we just don't see it yet.
And keep in mind when your question of what kind of economy, and right now, let's say for Collin County alone for this coming month, there's roughly, and this isn't spot on, roughly 110 properties on the foreclosure list coming up. Where when we go back 7 to 8 years ago, when the recession was in full, it took a while, even though the recession hit, let's say into 07 and 08, it takes a while for that process to go through. We were running at 2.5 times that many properties on the auction in each county. So there's a comparison of where we are right now. It's a little more normalized, certainly, but going back to what then Jonathan continued.
Well, and so something else I'd like to add is the fact that ebbs and flows, ups and downs, booms and recessions are inevitable, right? Like, so you may have a strong leader, you may have a strong economy going for a while. You're going to face a downturn. Now, I'm not saying you're going to face like we had in 08 where the bottom drops out, but it's just that's the way the market goes. Okay, so and you're showing me what do we?
We're down 1264 today. So
okay, so and I'm and I'm not quite as concerned about the stock market, right? But
neither am I. I mean,
yeah.
hopefully my opening gave you a feeling of. I think this media has overreacted. I think the population has overreacted, and I think it continues as we get feedback.
But it's good feedback. We're okay.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's just an overreaction. I mean, as you just go to Costco today, this past weekend, my wife and I are shocked to hear 32 minutes later after they opened, they were out of toilet paper, and I'm trying to figure out why toilet paper. Why is that?
Well, Costco
the
by
one
its
thing
definition is hoarding.
You've got to have, you've got to have toilet paper.
That's
a necessity.
That's their marketing strategy. Okay, so it's all. But people are, you've got 24-hour news now on not just the radio but television, and some people just sit home and watch, and all they're talking about is it's getting worse and worse and worse, and so perspective is needed, and the other side needs to come up. Like Newsweek did an article, 50,000 people have survived this. They've had it and survived, and they're fine. And so you got to have both sides of the story. So sickness or health or whatever, people need a house to live in. People are going to live somewhere. They're either going to rent or they're going to buy.
You need a house to go and stay 2 weeks and to
you can quarantine yourself.
I mean,
That's right.
But we're trying to look a little bit more ahead than 2 weeks. But it's the one cool thing about real estate. There's never going to be more of it, and people have to live somewhere. So
exactly.
it either they're buying or they're renting or they're squatting. That's the only three choices there are. And so, and in this area, Dallas-Fort Worth, it's traditionally been very strong. So,
well, it continues to be strong, and that's where I again, refinancing, working through the debt situation, or working through challenges that you may be dealing with. There are ways to work through that now, even more so with a lot of financial approach. But again, we still deal with foreclosure, people losing jobs, people abandoning situations because they overextended themselves and they did not know what to do. They did not consult your professionalism, and therefore they walk away. They leave. They go find a job in another state, and they just forget about, unfortunately those things follow them, but the challenges they're here. And so, so you're saying about 110,000 in Collin County is a rough number.
110 properties, not thousands. 110.
Oh, just 110.
That's minimal is my point. I was bringing that up to be a positive that It's
Boy, if it's
not that
110,
much.
I'm going to bring
We're
out
at
the
the-
old checkbook and start writing some checks.
Well, we're going to have to change the name of this to the Soup Show.
Soup line
'Cause
show.
we're going to need some soup. 110,000.
Well, and something I'd like to add as well is that it's situational in some areas. So, for example, in Houston, I've had a number of clients who, the energy sector has taken a hit recently, and it's had some turmoil. And so, for example, like let's say you've got a client who's running a hotel that's very dependent on energy sector workers who come in and stay for a short period of time. And there's ups and there's downs, but I mean, if the energy sector is humming along well, you get a lot of people staying at your hotel. But when the energy, if the bottom drops out of the energy sector, then
Such
all of a
as a
sudden
20% drop in per barrel prices in a day.
you're gonna have some problems, and
It
that's
takes
what
a while to come back.
It does.
Well,
Sure.
it does in some cases. It was interesting that some of my very good friends and my I guess my sphere of influence group, I have about 3 of them in the industry, and again, Monday, all contractor employees, they were let go.
Mhm.
I mean, that is taken. OPEC has decided, and that's Russia and Saudi Arabia, made a very critical world decision to boost up the economy by dumping oil and they thought it was going to help where it does impact. And like you say, there's a trickle-down thought process of all the other industries that are being affected, and they're going to do cuts.
The shale business is based on $52 a barrel. The whole shale process is based on that barrel price. So
Mhm.
they're going to take a tremendous hit. And so
Well, we've seen this, but it's also taken a tremendous hit, and then all of a sudden it
I
comes
think
back.
Jeff was saying it. Everything ebbs and flows.
Yep.
A lot of people, it's the end of the world. The oil is going to be $20 a barrel, and gas is going to be cheap.
It's the end of
and
the
stuff,
world, so
and-
let's buy toilet paper.
yeah.
Exactly. Well, I
Yeah,
think
whatever.
I think going back to the point originally we were talking about why when the jobs numbers are so positive, you still have an uptick in
Yes.
evictions and foreclosures. I think people are humming along, just assuming that the growth and the progress is just going to continue in
Sustain
perpetuity.
itself. Yeah.
And so they don't actually have to anticipate or prepare for turbulence. And so there's no safety net. They haven't built one, and they're always overextending themselves. I know
Well,
I'm guilty of it too. And so when they do encounter a situation such as the situation we're in now, they don't have anything that they can fall back on. They have no savings. They have no liquidity that they can dip into, and they find themselves
And you're
over a
talking
barrel.
about 40% of the American population, by the way.
Okay, what is 40%
Absolutely.
of the they live in paycheck to paycheck?
That's correct.
Is that what you're trying to? Because that was the question I was going to ask.
That's exactly correct.
80% don't have $20,000 in the bank.
How many do not have 2,000?
Yeah.
More than 40%.
Yeah.
And yet they have 38,000, as I read the number in my monologue, 38,000 in debt on the average
But
is
back to
over
what you were
85%.
saying, humming along. That word, humming along, that means a normal economy. What is your percentage basing the tick up on? When it's humming along, what means more?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you have an average economy or a good one like right now, and you say we have an uptick, is there such an average when you're humming along? Like humming along's average.
Sure.
What is the normal foreclosure rate when we're humming along to
That's
have the basis for an uptick in a good economy?
That's a Jonathan question. The foreclosures is not where.
Put a number to it,
get
Jonathan.
involved.
Come on.
Man. Okay, so
We're putting you on the spot.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna have to go look it up. We looked up not that long ago. We looked up the bankruptcy statistics because the United States bankruptcy courts compile and put those out. And I'll be honest, I don't remember them.
Give us a scientific, wild
a
ass
swag.
gag.
Yeah, I
A
guess
swag.
I think
You're
uptick
talking to
is
an
a
actual
swag.
scientist here, so I'm loath to
Yeah.
I want to see him on the poker table now. I really want to see him on the poker table.
I don't have a poker face. Are you kidding me?
Whenever
I'd be
you-
like, wow, I've got 3 aces. Oh,
How?
I've got yeah.
And I wear glasses.
So again, just trying to get an understanding, because I have been through 22 years ago bankruptcy, and then in lieu of foreclosure, I gave up my home,
Right.
and have been through that process. So That was back when people overextended themselves. They were giving loans to, hey, breathe on this mirror and you get a loan, right, Tom? That's the way they worked, right?
That is correct.
Mirror, and hey, you're alive. Okay, we'll give you a loan. Here's $400,000 home, and we overextended. We were home poor for the fact, and so a lot of things, foreclosures, bankruptcies, so forth, went on, and now bankruptcy is not such a bad word. It's probably a savings of a lot of people. And if you look at the CEO market, most CEOs have been through one bankruptcy or another because they started a business and they did something. I mean,
Most
we
billionaires
all
have been
grow.
broke.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So bankruptcies, just in a humming along market, as Alan puts it, we're averaging what? 10%, 5%, 3%? I mean, I have no idea.
I can probably I can try to look it up when we go on a break.
So if y'all haven't figured out
So
yet,
Tom
Jonathan,
looked it
they're,
up.
they're not going to
So
let
Tom
you off
did
the hook.
look it up.
Jonathan's not going to. So we're going to go to a break. We're talking evictions.
That rate's 0.47%.
What? What's that?
That rate is 0.47%.
Oh, did you look it up? Okay,
Yeah.
there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Our
That's much lower than I
informational.
expected.
Well, so here's what I can tell you that I do
0.04 or
remember.
0.47?
0.47.
So 0.5%.
Yeah.
Half a
Okay.
percent.
Much
Yeah.
lower than I expected.
Wow,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's huge. That's great.
Well,
That's
it's
vastly different than it was back in 2008.
Oh, gosh.
Where it was
Yeah.
nearly 10%.
Yeah.
yeah.
I can't tell you how many foreclosures I sold right here in Frisco in 2009 and 10. It was unbelievable.
I believe it.
But
People
it was
with
the
cash.
13-year low in
Cash.
2010.
Hey, well, while we're discovering a lot of data here, folks, we're going to take a quick break to give us a breather. We're talking evictions and foreclosures here in North Texas. Stay tuned with us. We'll be right back.
3, 2, 1. KVGIRadio.com.
Y'all really just opened my bubble and just.
KVGI Radio brings you conversation and entertainment. Be sure to follow us on social media. Who streams the best talk shows? We do.
You're listening to KVGI Radio.
Playing Hangman over there? I like that.
Hello and welcome
Hangman.
to Welcome
I'm
Home
gone.
Radio with your hosts,
I spell hell.
Blair Thomas and Tom Holm.
H-E double hockey stick.
The waters in the mortgage industry can be pretty muddy. Luckily,
Pretty
Welcome
muddy.
Home Radio has the answers for you, the consumer.
We like
and
catfish.
now, here are your hosts, Blair Thomas and Tom Holm.
And welcome back to Welcome Home Radio, March 11th. It's a beautiful day out there, and we're enjoyed with Fidelity National Title and Patel Law Group, Jeff, Brandon, and Jonathan. We're talking evictions and foreclosures. We had a really interesting discussion off air in reference to a key topic, which I think, as you talked about, 81,000 just here in Collin County are renting, and they're renting for purposes a wide variety. But there are some people out there that do not know the difference between foreclosure and bankruptcy, and that there is a huge difference financially looked at as a lender on those two topics. So, Tom, take us down the road real quick for bankruptcy and foreclosure, and give us some perspectives of programs that allow, hey, there's terms that you're not allowed to break, or the rules that look at that to give them ideas.
Okay, so if you've run through a foreclosure, the loss of your house, and that means also a deed in lieu of, is where you go back to your lender and you say, hey, I can't make the payments, and here's the deed. They're both construed as a foreclosure. So that means once I've given the house back, it's going to be 4 years from the date I do that, from the completion of the foreclosure. It'll be 4 years before I'm eligible through most programs in order to buy a new home. And FHA is the one kind of go-to program out there that will allow you for a shorter period of time, 3 years. But foreclosure means basically I was willing to walk away from the house, and as such, I can't. Lenders aren't willing to renew that risk factor with that
Another
prior history.
question about that we get is from veterans. How does it? Do veterans get any special treatment?
No.
Okay, good.
No. Veterans would be treated actually more severely because they've been told when they bought the house that we're going to follow you until death do you
They lose
part.
the eligibility amounts dramatically on the rate of normally it's $36,000 is what they receive as a total. You lose whatever that value of that home when you get foreclosed, and that stays with you. Period.
Good information, right?
Yeah.
But I
Very
will
much
say
so.
I want to go into, there is one market that is a little bit more lenient. Tom, is the non-QM market.
Okay, so there is now and has been redeveloping over since 2008 and 10 during the downturn and after the SAFE Act was passed and all these different things. Loans were initially at that point all supposed to be qualified mortgages. I say that kind of theoretically.
Tongue in cheek?
Tongue in cheek.
Is that your QM program?
Yeah, qualified mortgages simply says that with the qualification
on
of the
this
borrower,
mirror. Don't
we have to
breathe
make
on it.
sure that they can repay it. However, with the loosening of the credit markets over the last 5 years, 7 years, we're seeing now exceptions to the rules as far as Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA loans. There is a secondary market out there that will create a new mortgage for you with a bankruptcy having been less than 4 years, with a 20% down payment typically is what they want. So 20, 25, or 30% down will affect your rate at a higher interest rate. So,
and this is called the secondary and non-QM market, and those investments are held in a portfolio separate from the Fannie, Freddie, Ginnie.
And typically the portfolio is created by insurance companies, MetLife, the Snoopy people, the lizard people, Flo, all of those create these special bond markets.
That little Geico has that money,
That little
man.
lizard, he really does. He's
So the banks lessen their risk by having more money down and a higher interest rate, which creates opportunity for people who have had troubles in the past.
Correct.
And that's what people need to hear, that if you're renting and you find yourself in that situation and you've gotten advice from parents, grandparents, loved ones, or people you just, think you trust about stuff like that, call and talk to Blair, talk to somebody who lends money, and or contact me. I'll get you in touch with somebody. And there's ways through these things a lot of times.
Well, and specifically he was focused on foreclosures because that is the primary residence looking at. I mean, it's dramatically different, I think, not dramatically, but it is a little bit different on investment properties on that. But bankruptcy, let's go into what the difference is for bankruptcy.
Well, now,
available.
Of course, a bankruptcy would imply that you kept your house payment, that you were still paying your house payment, or that you were able to maintain a rent payment during the course of the bankruptcy, where you're not going to pay back your debtors. And a lot of people think that they can get rid of certain debts with a bankruptcy. Well, you can't get rid of federal loans. So a student loan you can't get rid of if you have that. A tax
$1 billion
lien,
question nowadays.
tax liens,
Yeah.
they're not going to go away, whether they're from your ownership of a business or not paying your payroll taxes or your own federal income taxes. Those don't go away through a bankruptcy, but a bankruptcy will alleviate the debts that you've accumulated for credit cards, essentially. And if you're going to claim a bankruptcy, you're going to basically fall under two major headings. You're going to either file a Chapter 7 or you're going to file a Chapter 13. So Chapter 7 is a full remediation. Everything goes away. Chapter 13 says I'm going to repay a part of it or most of it over time, typically 3 years. Somewhere between 1 and 5 years of what the federal courts will generally allow for a repayment of a bankruptcy program.
And you guys that deal with the bankruptcies and the litigations and things, what do people quit paying on for? Is it the credit cards they don't pay, but they'll pay their car and their mortgage, or what are they doing?
Well, it depends. So I think you gave a pretty good summary of it. One of the things that he mentioned, and it's as accurate, is as a general matter, liens will ride through a bankruptcy. So if anything that's got a lien, if you want to keep it, like your house, your car, something like that, you're going to have to
reaffirm it.
Yeah,
you have to go back to
you're
the
gonna
vendor and say, hey, I do want to keep owning this.
Well, and so let me give you an example on a house, right? So like if you take a loan on a house and you fall a couple of months behind, you can catch up, and they file for foreclosure, right? They give you notice, hey, we're going to foreclose. You can file a Chapter 13 and kind of put the arrears into the 13 and pay them back. And so that's part of the plan. If you're not paying it though, then they get to there's some procedure by which they say, hey, bankruptcy court, lift the automatic stay, and the automatic stay is what stops people from foreclosing, and said, look, he's not paying. Now, as a general matter, and you guys know this, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, a bank would rather have the money than the collateral. Right?
Well, I think our audience needs to hear that.
Okay.
The bank does want to work with you, and I think, having gone through this, I will tell you personally, that was one of the scariest things, having to admit to and talk to somebody how I can help myself. And if you sit back, hunker down, and don't do anything, ignore those notices, don't make phone calls, that's when it gets worse. Banks do want to just see the money, and they're willing to work with you through that. If they want to change the mortgage, and I don't know all the insights on changing up, but if they're extending or make extenuating circumstances, they will do that. Student loans, they will do the same thing. Do not ignore those notices, but communicate. Now, if you got to go to professional help, like our gentleman here in studio today, then call them. They will help you. But the bottom line is ask for advice. Do not hunker down. Do not try to do this by yourself, or do not try to just run. You can't outrun it.
It's got to be.
It's like outrunning the person in the mirror, but communicate with somebody and get a plan together, because if you don't do that, it just gets worse and it compounds itself.
Well, Blair, one of the things you took the words out of my mouth. I was using the image of a lot of people as humans. We lose our job. We're going through something tough. We just put our head in the sand, and that's what you're talking about with communication. There's a handful of times of year that I experience. I've got one right now I'm working on. I'll tell you about one in January. A gentleman had a very nice home here in Frisco, lost his job. It got real tough on him, right?
Yeah.
He was literally 9 days before foreclosure. He allowed an agent to put his house on the market. They started getting offers in immediately. And what we were able to do is, and I made a ton of calls on this, because as you said, these mortgage companies, these banks, they do not really want to foreclose, because
They don't want the property.
The whole process costs them almost $25,000 a property, so they're losing more money that way. So, but what happened in this case? That again, a few times a year we go through this. Enough calls were made. We had a signed, accepted offer, proof of funds from the buyer. They pulled the property off the foreclosure 45 minutes before the auction started. They pulled it, and then 4 days later, we closed the property. Instead of walking away, having a foreclosure and nothing, this gentleman walked away with $9,000 because he did have some equity in the property.
And he has some
That's
late pays, but after 12 months, those late
That'll
pays,
clear
he
up.
can come back and explain that and buy something.
I have another
something
property
else.
right now. I'm in the midst of helping
so
someone.
instead of having that
call.
on there, that foreclosure for 4 years, just by having that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
that's a great story.
And that is having equity is key.
Well,
and most people do have equity.
I want to make sure our listeners just heard something. Tom said something very valid, but I want to make sure you understand it. It may be 4 years before you can actually do a loan or get a lender to communicate, but it stays on your credit report 10 years. Any negative statements stay on your report once it's cleaned for 10 years. If it's in the process, it stays on there continually, and then it goes 10 years and it will fall off. So be aware, this will follow you if you don't reach out like Jeff's story and get help, because it can impact you down the road. Even though you think you're free and clear of it, it's still impacting you 10 years from now.
Well, and I just want to
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to reiterate something that all of y'all were saying, which is don't bury your head. And the reason when I talk to, seriously. So when I talk to my clients, I take a very pragmatic approach to it. I'm like, look, the plane is going down, right? It is what it is. Let's do a soft landing. Right. There's no reason that there's systems for doing this, that in the law there's just practical experience that everybody who works in this type of industry knows how to land the plane softly. And let's do what Jeff said, right? Like, if you've got equity, let's figure out a way for you to
and there's more tools in the marketplace now. Like, as a member of Keller Williams, I'm certified to be a Keller Offers agent. I can buy your home. So if you have equity, but you don't have money, cash, to fix your home up, get it ready for sale, you don't want to go through the process, you're stressing on enough, you just need your equity, I can come in and offer that service. Buy the home as is, you take a little bit of a hit on it because it needs work, but you get your money fast. And if we decide together as a team that we don't want to go that route, then I can sell it traditionally. I can put it on the market right away, and we can take care of some other things as far as fixing it up too. Well, so there's more options now.
So the same logic that applies in the context of a foreclosure, staving off a foreclosure, just communication, right, with the bank, applies in the context of renting. It's a little bit more challenging when you're talking about multifamily, but when you're talking about single-family properties, which a lot of people are renting, I see that more and more nowadays. The landlord, more times than not, in my experience, wants to keep that tenant in if they can and collect that rent. But what I see is the tenant just, they bury their head in the sand, they stop paying, they use every mechanism they can to just delay and get free rent. They'll go to the court, or they'll wait till an eviction case is filed at the 11th hour. They'll file for bankruptcy. There's an easier path forward. That's instant gratification, but it creates long-term problems because the eviction's coming, and the long-term impact of that is that eviction is going to prevent you from renting for the foreseeable future. Most times there's a workout that's possible. You just got to talk to the landlord. They don't want to go through a 3-month legal battle.
Right.
They will be reasonable and try to help you out, especially if you've fallen on hard times. But people just assume, they just kind of throw their hands in the air and say, there's nothing I can do, and I'm just going to ride this one out.
That is such a good point. I mean, I've heard that a gazillion times, and that's why the radio show today is really good. There are options, folks. It's like a bad foundation. You just let it go. It's going to get worse with time. But you can get your foundation fixed, and you can get your finances fixed. But you got to make an attempt. Call one of the guys here at the radio show today. Call somebody. Get some help.
Well, and I think that is a true challenge, but understanding what are the options, I think that's one of the biggest things, and we don't know our options. We don't know the opportunities, and by communicating that, asking those questions, and they are hard because we have to admit them. We have to admit a mistake, or we admit that we overextended ourselves. I want that to be, one of the things that, hey, nobody at this table would ever judge anybody. We've been there. At least I have. If anybody hasn't else, I'm the one here. Contact me. I can empathize with you because I've been there. I've done it. And there's not a train coming out of that tunnel. There is light at the end of that tunnel.
And as always, if anybody has any questions out there, they can call in, right?
Sure, they can call in. What's that number?
877-337-5844.
So call us now. We're going to go to break real quick. We'll get right back to you.
I've really just opened my bubble and just...
KVGI Radio brings you conversation and entertainment. Be sure to follow us on social media. Who streams the best talk shows? We do.
You're listening to KVGIRadio.com. Streaming live from the KVGI studios in Frisco, Texas. Live without limits.
Pick on him.
saw the yellow
He's a
number,
big boy.
So welcome home, radio.
Sit in your corner.
With your hosts, Blair Thomas and Tom Holm. The waters in the mortgage industry can be pretty muddy. Luckily, Welcome Home Radio has the answers for you, the consumer.
We specialize
and
in
now,
catfish.
here are
I
your
love that.
hosts,
Muddy.
Blair Thomas and Tom Holm.
And welcome back to Welcome Home Radio, March 11th. We're talking evictions and foreclosures with Jeff, Brandon, and Jonathan of Patel Law Group and Fidelity National Title. In our break, we were having a conversation real quick, and this is one of the key things. We're going to talk about evictions, but we're going to talk about it from two perspectives. One, we have investors out there that own homes, that rent them, lease them out. We need to talk from that perspective, and then we also need to talk about the client, the actual leaseor, and see from that perspective, or leasee is that. I see. I get them all mixed up.
Lessor.
Yeah. Thank you. I got my
lessor-
man here.
The lesser.
Wait, stay with me, Brandon.
Lesser of two evils.
Me or him?
Whatever.
So let's take the perspective. We actually have a wonderful investor here in the room. Our wonderful professor and educational teacher, Tom. He has a wonderful
teacher.
You said professor. I was thinking Gilligan's Island.
That's exactly right. Ginger, Marianne.
Yeah.
No, Marianne.
There goes the show.
Whoops.
I thought he'd be going Mrs. House.
One of them noises.
Oh.
Well, she did have money.
But let's talk about.
We
Let's
just
talk
hit the
about.
mud.
Okay, I'm losing it totally.
Yeah.
Let's get back on evictions. How does the process start? Because as an investor, you want to take care of your homes. You want to keep people there. You're probably just as motivated like the bank to keep that property leased. But what is the eviction process that takes place?
Well, so and you'll see that the Texas courts talk about this all the time. Is that you always start from the lease, and what does the lease say? Who's entitled to possession? And so you got to look and see, has the tenant breached the lease, and if so, what are your remedies? So the terms of eviction are generally set by the lease, except there's a lot of protections under Texas law for residential, right? Like commercial, it's kind of the wild, wild west. But for residential, the law will provide a number of protections. And so the first thing you got to do generally is, if you're the landlord and the tenant has stopped paying rent, or it's a non-pet house and they brought in like 8 bulldogs and they're tearing the place up or something like that, right? Sorry, man.
Oh, we struck a nerve.
Then you've got to give notice and say, look, you're going to be, I'm going to file for eviction against you. Okay, so the next
And that's written notice.
That is correct. That is correct. And there's things, and there's all kinds of requirements that it's listed out under the law. And typically it's got to be 3 days unless the lease provides for less, but you can't go less than 1 day.
3 days after the.
So you've got to give, you've got to give
item has
notice, and then you got to wait at least 3 days typically before you file for eviction. So in order to actually evict someone, you have to go file a lawsuit in Texas court.
What does that period intend to do? The 3 days. What does that intend to do?
Give them time
let them
to
create
get
remedy.
out.
Yeah, give them time to get out,
Okay.
find a new place.
It needs to be said because people need to know that.
Right.
Yeah.
No one
Well,
ever.
they're not trying to correct the situation in that 3 days?
Well, you can give them an opportunity, and some people will give them a 3-day notice. It can be a notice to vacate. It can be a notice to cure or vacate. But you got to be specific. If it is a notice to cure and then they don't cure and it's not,
Then another 3 days for eviction.
then you got to give them a notice to vacate. So, and some people fall into that trap. They
you can't do
assume,
the same both.
yeah, and so you've got to be strictly compliant with the property code. And if you're not, and you go to court, you file and go to court, the judge will just kick you out, and you waited weeks to get in front of a judge to say you didn't comply, go back and start over. So
There's like Brandon's saying, there's very technical rules from the landlord side, and you could, like, just on a tiny technicality, you could mess up and not do it right, and the judge will just be like, bye, you got to start all over.
Tom, have you ever had an issue like this, or have you been through it with a tenant?
Over the many years, yes, more than once.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the experience like?
Well, first off, to kind of go back with, why are people being evicted? I know that one of the reasons is landlords tend to raise their rents, and that seems to be a big driving force because these folks are living paycheck to paycheck anyway, and they're not seeing real wage increases per se. I mean,
Right.
2 or 3% per year, but landlords like myself have seen taxes increase on our homes substantially, and it's like, well, if that house is really worth that, maybe I should just sell it. But you want the income, that type of deal. So it's an offset with regards to, do I want to keep my tenants in there and keep the rents the same? So generally, if you've been paying me for 2 or 3 or 4 years, you probably haven't seen a rent increase, which is nice because you pay me on time. The reasons why I normally don't see it is because their sources of income change or dry up, or there's some type of situation within the family structure where there's a divorce or there's something like that that's going on.
Critical change.
Yeah.
A medical challenge.
Possibly that. So family structures have always been really kind of my driving force, I think, for the reasons I've had to evict people.
Or they added a dog.
Have you ever had to get?
No, I haven't had an added dog, fortunately.
You ever had to get legal
I
involved?
did
or
find a dog in a place that wasn't supposed to be.
did you ever
there,
have to get
but
legal involved?
I didn't do it. I did it myself,
Okay.
giving them notification, giving them the proper notification in order to, and then they made a decision whether or not they were going to stay in that house or not. And the only bad situation I've ever had is somebody was operating. I mean, I should have known when they put all the cameras on their house and everything. Was operating a deal out of the house where they were handling some type of, not drugs, fortunately, because the DEA knocks on my door. I'm in a lot of trouble then.
Yeah.
But the more I got suspicious of, finally I went to the Irving police and we had a conversation. And sure enough, there was stuff being stolen that they were hawking on the internet and that type of deal. So that became a real
They pay their rent on time?
nasty issue. They paid.
He's a blacklisted pawn shop.
They always wanted to pay in cash.
Yeah, right.
Amazing.
that may be a breach of the
Tom's
law.
like, I'll give you a
Always
discount.
wanted to-
Tom figured it out real quick, and he says, I'm charging you more.
Yeah, right. Should have done that. But this most recent situation, again, this lady I know has gone on and off with her boyfriend and so on and so forth. And I've tried to be very helpful as far as the single mom, taking care of her kids and that type of deal.
Yeah.
It's always been a huge concern on my part with, their circumstances. And I've got the ability to have some flexibility that way. But
That's cool.
But once you get to about the 15th day, you're thinking,
Yeah.
and she's caught up before, so and it's not cheap to catch up. So I'm like,
I did it for a few years, and it was a mom with 2 kids, teenage boys, worse than dogs, I think sometimes. But and there was an issue there at the end, and just being a guy, so a woman had bad circumstance where she's got her kids by herself. Just kind of let it roll, and we agreed to let it end, and I let her out of some financial obligations. It's my privilege to do that as a landlord.
Sure.
So we did that, and then I sold the house. So,
well, I'm curious, if it goes to the point where you are in front of a judge, what is, and this is a silly question, but what is their obligation? Are they listening to the story? From landlord to tenant?
Well,
are they listening
first off,
to the
will the
story?
tenant show up?
Are they listening to the story of the tenant who's struggling, or the landlord? You have an agreement, and the landlord, they're just looking at the numbers, saying, "Okay, this agreement has been breached, and you're done."
It's pretty much for non-payment of rent. It's pretty straightforward. It's, did you pay the rent? Do you have a legal justification not to pay the rent? And if the answer is no, you're done, right? And if the notice is proper.
What does that mean, legal justification?
If
that you've created an unhealthy situation for them to live in.
Okay.
If there's no legal
can I stop there? Let's go
enough,
back to that.
Not enough smoke detectors,
not
enough locks on the doors.
What happens if a reservist, National Guard, has been called up for duty, changed job, all of that has to happen, and now all of a sudden, what is that a legal?
Yeah,
and one more example would be if you're on government assistance and part of your rent is paid by the government, and you haven't received those funds, it's delayed for whatever reason, and so your rent payment is a partial payment, so you're behind, but it's a function of you're still waiting on government subsidies. So
the landlord knew that going in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's usually spelled out in the
absolutely.
Yeah.
Take over.
Oh, no. Okay, so to answer your question, the answer is, and that's why I started with earlier, the concept of it's typically set by the lease, right? The terms of the lease, comma, as modified by law, and it could be either state law or, as you brought up, federal law. There are federal protections for evicting somebody that's been called up for active service, active duty.
Okay.
There's also protections for so back in 2009. After the big crash in 2008, there were other federal protections that were put into place. So if your landlord got foreclosed on by a lender as a result of not making their payments, you're not going to get thrown out on the street. So there's various protections that are put into place. They're somewhat complex, as most federal law is, but yeah. So the answer to answer your question is yes. That absolutely the judge has to take that into consideration.
So really, we need to be going back to, I think, the key word you said: communicate, ask questions, talk to a professional, give us a call, help us help you, because burying your head in the sand, which is, I don't know why people tend to do that in this situation. Would you agree? I mean, across the board, from different ages, we tend to want to not approach or directly hit our challenges that are facing us. You need to call and find out. You need to ask questions.
Well, I mean, yeah, in situations like that where you have fallen on hard times, people tend to isolate. It's an embarrassing thing, and you assume that people are not going to be compassionate or understanding of that, especially a landlord. There is a stigma that you don't pay your rent, you're out on the street, and so the default for a lot of tenants is just to find any angle they can work to get as much free time as they can, and as opposed to just asking for help. And more times than not, they're willing to give it, but that conversation never begins. And so,
well, most people are asking for free help, and they get it from their family, friends, and online Facebook posts, and they think that's the answer, as opposed to sitting down, talking to, even over the phone, talking to a professional and saying, here's my situation, what can you advise me for? And I think those resources are available right here at this show. Yeah. That's what they're here for. So I challenge you to...
You legal guys, the lawyers, well, how long does the process generally take when somebody comes to talk to you?
So, for example, after the 3-day notice, you file the lawsuit, and then you got to get the person served. and that you usually pay a fee. You know, you just have the constable go do it, and then you wait until so you start at the JP court. And let me just clarify: there's different courts in Texas that are established by law. You typically have, you know, for in Dallas and Collin County, you're gonna have a district court, and then just going down the line, the county court, which deals with smaller controversies, and then go further down, you've got the JP court. And if you want to think about a JP court, think of it kind of sort of as the people's court. So it doesn't deal with anything over
Judge
10.
Judy.
Is it live on TV?
Well, so
Is Mary Ann there?
well, and so I mean no, but so here's the thing: it doesn't deal with controversies over $10,000. All by state law, all evictions have to start in a JP court.
Correct.
Are your homes not worth more than $10,000?
No. What they owe me is
The rent.
Yeah, the rent.
They better not owe me $10,000.
Hopefully haven't
or
got to
I'm
that
really
point,
screwed
Tom.
up.
Yeah.
Well, and part of the justification for that is JP judges don't have to be lawyers, so you're not like not all. Yeah, so that was my reaction at first too, and so not all JP judges have to be attorneys, and so what'll happen is, and they're elected, right? So like you're elected, and then after you get elected, maybe you're
I want that job.
No, you can.
There,
I mean,
you
you
could.
got it.
You could.
You
You
got it. Yeah,
JP.
no, yeah, and then you got to.
All rise.
Seriously.
So well, to answer your question, I mean, from inception to trial, it's pretty much about 3 weeks time.
Yeah.
That's best case if there's no appeal, because you can't get a writ issued until the 6th day post judgment. Then there's an appeals process. Everyone's entitled to it, whether you have the money to post a bond or file an affidavit of indigency, which most people do now. And there's so much literature out there online that people can go find tenants. They know how to game the system, and they can drag this on forever. I mean, I've had it go on forever and ever and ever. And so,
Say it, Tom.
to the point about communication, and I advise my clients of this all the time, is when you're a landlord, especially if you only have a couple of investment properties, sometimes it's just the smarter play, because they don't want an eviction on their record. So they're going to appeal. They're going to challenge you to see how much you want to invest in time and resources towards pursuing this. Just make a deal with them. I'll let you go. I'm not even going to pursue the back rent for a month or whatever. Just get out.
Well, that's what I did.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
To your example, that
simple.
sometimes is the smart play.
And then I just sold the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if and a lot of times tenants will go for that. Don't chase me. Don't disrupt or blemish my credit. Allow me to get out and rent.
Well, they were good people. They were not
Sure.
trying to do bad. But you can't
And
be.
they left the house decent. I mean,
Absolutely,
they did,
yeah.
And so there's
Yeah.
So
other
you-
considerations
right.
for the landlord that you have to weigh in.
Yeah.
Because if you go into the house and you're giving them this notice and it's all trashed out and they're
Yeah.
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 using all the toilet
And-
the world on.
And I will say, when they left,
Sorry.
Yeah.
they left it beautiful.
Yeah.
She did her best to
She
clean it
cleaned
up,
up.
and it worked out really good. And whatever, life goes on, right?
If you're renting, if my one piece of advice would be selective in who you rent to. Know who
yeah.
you're renting to. I know that a lot of people have
Big
these
deal.
investment properties that are vacant, and they just need to get a body in there so they're not paying the mortgage out of pocket. It's a bad idea.
Yeah, I've had
It's
I've
worth
had
it to go
clients.
the extra 30 days, believe
Yeah.
me.
I've had landlords who came to me and they were like, well, it was a higher end property. It was $3,500 a month in rent, and they were excited to get someone in there, and I think they even gave them like 1 month's free. And then we're like 8 months down the road, and not a single payment has been made. Yeah, no.
And they're
so-
getting
and
the
then when he
system
said
all over the place.
when he said they
9
can
months free.
yeah, so when he said they can
What a
drag it
deal.
out,
Whoa.
like seriously, if somebody
They're
digs their
gaming
heels
it.
in,
I want to rent from that guy.
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but then he's not like Brandon
Who
said
do
a
you
minute
rent
ago.
from?
He's not going to get. I mean, it's going to go on his credit, and nobody else is going to rent to him, right? Like it'll pop up.
Well, I unfortunately we're going to have to call it a
No,
day. I'm
no.
sorry. The neighborhood is closing.
Not fair,
Hey,
Blair.
real quick, how do people get a hold of you guys so that they can ask those questions?
So all three of us can be reached at the office direct, 972-650-6848. That's the Patel Law Group. And then you can even reach me direct, 214-794-5969. And if you've known me for any time at all, I just tell you, I don't have all the answers, but I know where to get them. So between Brandon and Jonathan and 12 other attorneys, I'm texting someone to help get you an answer. So just
Awesome.
make sure you're reaching out. We are here to help.
We
Sure.
will do that.
Beautiful.
And guys, appreciate you taking time to come and explain this. I think this is a key topic. Things are going crazy out there in the market. I believe riding in place right now is going to be the best solution for most people. In fact, those that have flexible cash, I would be buying into the market instead of leaving it like so many are doing. But
then again, this is not a financial.
I'm not a financial.
Very clear on that, especially for
Y'all do what you want.
those of us who lost $250,000.
Figure
in
it
the last
out.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Blair Thomas.
I'm Tom Holm.
And I'm Alan Pace.
God bless. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next week.